Welcome to the DHA's Housing Choice Voucher Program briefing. This presentation will explain the program and describe your responsibilities as a participant and the next steps. Please pay careful attention to this presentation. Write down any questions you may have. Questions will be answered at the end of this presentation. The printed materials and this orientation briefing are available for your review at any time on DHA's website.
The Housing Choice Voucher Program is a federally funded program designed to help eligible low-income persons, the elderly, and persons with disabilities to reside in safe, decent, and affordable housing. In the program, there are 3 bi-party contracts. The first contract agreement is between the program participant and the Housing Authority. This contract is issued when you are determined eligible to participate in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. This contract agreement is called the Housing Voucher. The second agreement is the lease agreement between you and the landlord. You will be required to sign the landlord's lease agreement before you move into the rental unit. The third agreement is between the Housing Authority and the landlord or property owner. This agreement is called the Housing Assistance Payments Contract. It governs the housing assistance payments the Housing Authority will make on your behalf to the landlord.
Now let's review how the program works. Persons who have applied for assistance are selected from the waiting list by random selection and local preferences. The Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act of 2005, also known as VAWA, prohibits denial or admission to an otherwise qualified applicant on the basis that the applicant is or has been a victim of domestic violence, dating violence, or stalking. The Housing Authority interviews each applicant to determine if applicants meet the eligibility criteria to participate in the Housing Assistance Program. The Housing Authority provides an orientation briefing for eligible applicants and issues a Housing Choice Voucher. The voucher holder is responsible to seek housing of their choice and request the landlord to accept them as a tenant. Applicants who receive a housing voucher are responsible for finding a rental unit that meets their needs and where the landlord is willing to rent to them. You have 90 days to find suitable housing on the private market before your voucher expires. If the landlord agrees to accept the voucher holder as their tenant, the landlord and the voucher holder complete the Request for Tenancy approval form and submits to the Housing Authority along with other required documents. The Housing Authority will review the request for tenancy approval and make arrangements with the landlord to inspect the dwelling unit to determine if it meets program standards and to determine if the owner's requested rent is reasonable in comparison to other unassisted rental units in the area. Following the Housing Authority's review and approval of the dwelling unit, the landlord and the tenant will sign the landlord's lease. The landlord and the Housing Authority will sign a housing voucher contract. This contract identifies the amount of total rent, the amount of tenant rent, and the amount of rent to be paid by the Housing Authority. After the contract is signed, the Housing Authority authorizes the tenant to move into the dwelling unit and its move-in day.
For the next few moments, we will discuss how the payments work. First, the tenant is required to pay the amount of tenant rent identified by the Housing Authority. Tenant rent is to be paid to the landlord on the first of each month. The Housing Authority also makes its monthly rental assistance payments directly to the owner. 2 payments together equal the total rent to the owner. Now let's turn our attention to payment standards. Payment standards are established every year by the Congress. For the current fiscal year, the payment standards are listed in your briefing packet. Additionally, the payment standards can be reviewed on our website under Applicants and Residents. The payment standard is a guide to help you shop for a suitable dwelling. Savvy program participants find dwelling units with rents that are equal or less than the applicable payment standard. The Housing Authority does not approve rents based on the payment standard. The amount of rent that will be authorized is based on rent reasonableness. The rent for the dwelling unit you select will be compared to the rent of other similar dwelling units in the area. If the rent for the dwelling unit you select is considered reasonable, the dwelling unit's rent can be approved. The portion of rent you will be responsible to pay will be principally based on your household income. Participants typically pay about 30% of their household income for rent. The amount will increase if you select a unit with a rent that is higher than the payment standard. Please remember that your portion of rent cannot exceed 40% of your adjusted income. Here we review how the tenant rent is calculated in the Housing Choice Voucher program with an example. First, we will review the right side of the slide. In our example, we have selected a family with one adult and two children. In this example, the family's annual income is $23,684. Annual income includes income from employment, benefits from Social Security, Veterans Administration, or other organizations, interest earned from checking or savings accounts, child support, and regular cash contributions to your household by a relative or friend, and any income that you receive from an asset such as a money market account. The next line shows allowable deductions. In this example, because the family has two dependent children, the family is eligible for a deduction of $480 for each child, for a total deduction of $960. The family pays child care to enable the head of household to work. The annual unreimbursed child care expenses total $5,200. Although the program provides for other allowances and deductions, in our example, the family only qualifies for the dependent and child care deductions. The next line shows the adjusted income, which is the total annual income minus the total allowable deductions. The adjusted income in our example is $17,524. Now turn your attention to the left side of the slide. Here we divide the adjusted income, $17,524, by 12 months, which equals $1,460. This is the monthly adjusted income. 30% of monthly adjusted income equals the estimated portion of tenant rent. In the example, 30% of $1,460 equals $438. This is the estimate of the family's monthly share of rent that will be paid by the tenant to the owner. The actual amount of tenant rent may vary depending on the cost of the dwelling unit selected by the family. If you select a dwelling unit with a rent higher than the payment standard, you will pay more than 30% of your adjusted income for rent. Program participants may not pay more than 40% of your income for rent. After you select the dwelling unit and the Housing Authority completes a rent reasonableness assessment, staff will inform you of the amount of rent that you are responsible to pay. Next, let's review how the utility allowance works. On the right-hand side of the slide is an example of how the Housing Authority determines the estimate of your monthly utility allowance. The Housing Authority included a copy of its utility allowance schedule in your briefing package. There is a separate schedule for each unit type: multifamily apartments, duplex units, and single-family homes. It is important to select the correct schedule corresponding to the type of dwelling unit you select to rent. Each schedule presents a table which includes the type of utilities such as heat, cooking, hot water, electricity, air conditioning, water and sewer. A row of information is provided for you to indicate if the heat, cooking, and hot water utility is gas or electric. The utility allowance is determined by the type of unit you select, the type of utilities found in the unit selected, based on the utilities the tenant is responsible to pay, and the lesser of the number of bedrooms in the unit or your voucher size. The utility allowance schedule presents an estimate of the utility cost that the tenant will pay. In our example, the tenant selected a 2-bedroom rental unit. The tenant will be responsible for electric heat at $49, electric cooking $13, other electric $27, air conditioning $22, and electric water heating $31. In this example, the total monthly utility allowance is $142. The owner provides the range and refrigerator appliance and pays for the tenant's water and sewer usage. In our example, the payment standard for a 2-bedroom unit in the selected zip code is $905. In this example, the contract rent is $749. The utility allowance equals $142. DHA will pay $367. The remaining amount, $382, is to be paid by the tenant. The landlord will receive their rent payment in 2 parts. In this example, $367 would be paid monthly by DHA, and the tenant would pay $382. Both parties would pay their portion of rent directly to the landlord. Please note, this is an example to explain how the participant income and rent is calculated. Your situation will be different and unique to your household. The amount of rent you will be responsible to pay will depend on several variables: your household income, the applicable payment standard, the contract rent, and the utility allowance specific to the unit you identify. A leasing professional will provide you with a rent estimate based on the specifics known to us at this time. Program participants pay a portion of rent based on the amount of their adjusted household income and the cost of the dwelling unit they select. Program participants that select units with gross rents, that is, rent plus the utility estimate, that exceeds the applicable payment standard are likely to pay more than 30% of their adjusted income for rent. If you have specific questions, please ask a DHA leasing professional.
The tenant must abide by terms of the landlord's lease and the rules of the Housing Choice Voucher Program and be a good neighbor. Program participants must promptly notify DHA of any changes to the persons who will be residents in the assisted unit and any changes to their household income. Changes in information may be reported through the client portal. Program participants must also be recertified annually. Annual recertifications may be completed through the client portal as well. Next, we will discuss family obligations and provide an overview of what is required to ensure continued assistance. The participating family is responsible to supply any and all information or documentation the Housing Authority determines necessary. The family must allow the Housing Authority to inspect the dwelling unit. The family shall be honest and report all household income to the Housing Authority in a timely manner. The family may not engage in drug-related or other criminal activity. The family must comply with all Housing Choice Voucher Program requirements. The family must also notify the Housing Authority before moving, before adding or removing any household members, and whenever there is a change in household income. Program participants are expected to be a good neighbor, comply with the landlord's lease, use the dwelling unit solely as a principal place of residence, and comply with the HUD regulations. Please remember, relatives, friends, or others not on the lease may not live in the assisted dwelling unit. It's important to keep in mind that fraud is punishable by a fine and/or imprisonment. The following items are grounds for termination of housing assistance. Housing Choice Voucher assistance may be terminated if a family violates any of the family obligations, if a housing authority has terminated assistance under the voucher program in the last 10 years, if an adult family member has been evicted from public housing in the last 10 years, if a family member commits drug-related criminal activity or other criminal activity, if any family member commits fraud, bribery, or any other corrupt or criminal act in connection with any federal housing program, If the family currently owes rent or other amounts to the DHA or any other housing authority. If the family engages in serious or repeated violations of the owner's lease. There are other reasons program participants can lose their housing assistance, but these are some of the typical reasons for denial or termination of rental assistance. Please beware, it is a criminal offense to knowingly give false information to receive housing benefits, to get lower rent, or to receive aid or benefits under a federally funded assistance program. Violators can be fined or imprisoned. Please be sure to provide DHA with correct and accurate information. The owner and landlord has responsibilities too. A landlord may not rent to a son, daughter, brother, sister, grandson, granddaughter, or any other relative participating in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Participants with a disability may seek a reasonable accommodation to rent from a relative. Landlords must abide by the terms of the housing contract and lease agreement. Landlords must maintain the dwelling unit in safe, decent condition.
Now let's review DHA's responsibilities. The Housing Authority must determine client eligibility, make timely housing assistance payments, verify client income and other information, and recertify clients annually. The Housing Authority is responsible to inspect the assisted rental unit prior to initial occupancy and biennially to ensure the assisted unit is safe, decent, and sanitary. The Housing Authority is also responsible to ensure that the contract rent is reasonable in comparison to other similar rental units in the area. The Housing Authority is required to comply with all applicable HUD rules and regulations. Now let's review how to find a place to live. There are several ways to locate a suitable rental unit. Use the free apartment finder apps on your mobile device, such as Zillow, apartmentfinder.com, Trulia Rent, Zumper, Craigslist, Rent.com, and GoSection8.com. You can also review the classified ads section in the local newspapers, contact apartment complexes, communicate with local realtors, drive or walk the neighborhoods. Personally exploring neighborhoods will get you the best results. You may lease a dwelling unit anywhere in the city of Dallas and the surrounding 7 counties, including Dallas County, Denton, Collin, Ellis, Kaufman, Rockwall, and Tarrant County. The following is a list of the types of dwelling units that may be used as rental units in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Apartments, townhomes, condominiums, duplex units, mobile homes, and single-family detached houses.
The dwelling unit you select must meet the U.S. Department of HUD housing quality standards, and the rent charge for the dwelling unit must be reasonable in comparison to the other dwelling units. For the best results, look for a unit within your voucher size, meaning if you have a 2-bedroom housing voucher, search for a 2-bedroom rental unit. You have 90 days from today to select a suitable dwelling unit. The term of your housing voucher will expire in 90 days. If you experience extenuating circumstances, you may submit a request to extend the term of your housing voucher. Requests for an extension may be considered on a case-by-case basis due to documented extenuating circumstances or as a reasonable accommodation for a person with a disability.
There are 5 important things to remember after you have settled into your new home. Report any changes to DHA about persons residing in your household or your household income. You are responsible to complete an annual eligibility assessment for your continued participation in the program. Requests to move will be considered during the annual recertification period. Pay your portion of rent on the first of each month and be a good neighbor. As a participant in the Housing Voucher Program, you must report any changes in your household income or family composition to DHA within 10 calendar days. You are required to request Housing Authority permission in advance to add any member to your household. You are required to report increases or decreases to your household income, or if you have any other changes. Your rent will not be adjusted until the change you report is verified. All changes are verified through third-party verification. If you are not sure what you need to do, your DHA leasing professional can help. Program participants are responsible to be recertified for continued housing assistance annually. 90 days before the anniversary date, you will be notified that it's time to begin the recertification process. You must cooperate fully with DHA and complete the entire recertification process at this time, or your housing voucher and housing assistance will be terminated. For your convenience, you may complete your annual recertification through the Rent Cafe tenant portal. The recertification process starts before your lease expires to allow time to verify your household income, inspect your dwelling unit, and to obtain landlord and tenant signatures on all required documents. Program participants that may desire to relocate to another dwelling unit may do so at that time. You can only move once a year at annual recertification.
Now let's discuss portability. DHA's jurisdiction covers the city of Dallas and 7 surrounding counties. DHA is able to assist families who locate suitable rental housing units within the DHA jurisdiction. Unless you are a participant in the Walker Voucher program, you have the right to lease a dwelling unit outside of the DHA's jurisdiction. Leasing a rental unit outside of DHA's jurisdiction is called portability. If you intend to exercise your right to portability, please notify staff anytime after the end of this presentation and they will assist you in this process. If you or a member of your household requires a dwelling unit that is accessible by persons with disabilities, please ask the presenter for a list of dwelling units that are accessible through gosection8.com or other resources that may be available to DHA. Texas state law places responsibility on the tenant to make accessibility improvements to the rental dwelling unit with prior permission of the owner. The Housing Authority does not have funds available to assist you in making your unit handicap accessible. However, resources may be available through the state of Texas. If you are interested in this program, please ask your leasing professional for information about the state's Housing Rehabilitation Architectural Barrier Removal Program. For a list of handicapped accessible dwelling units, please consult with your leasing professional.
The federal regulations governing the Housing Choice Voucher Program are found in Title 24 of the Code of Federal Regulations, which are accessible through the Internet. DHA policies and procedures are available at www.dhanTX.com. Under the Fair Housing Act of 1968, it is unlawful to discriminate in housing based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familiar status, or handicap. The Fair Housing Act is intended to protect the renter or purchaser of a dwelling unit from seller or landlord discrimination. Its primary prohibition makes it unlawful to refuse to sell, rent to, or negotiate with any person because of that person's inclusion in a protected class, that is, on the basis of their race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, or handicap. If you believe someone is violating any of these fair housing regulations, or if you believe you are being discriminated against, please contact the Fair Housing Department of the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development by email, phone, or mail.
We've reviewed a lot of information today. Thank you for your time. There are a lot of important steps involved with the housing voucher process, and we hope this review has been helpful. Please be sure to direct any relevant questions to the leasing professional and to sign the necessary forms now. On behalf of everyone at DHA, thank you for the opportunity to serve you and your family. Welcome to part 2 of your Housing Choice Voucher Program briefing. In this briefing, we will review the important materials in your packet. The briefing packet that you have been provided gives you information regarding how to lease a unit, how the program works, portability features of your housing voucher, fair housing rights, and information on other topics. Please be sure to review all of the information provided and let your housing specialist know if you have any questions. In part 1 of this orientation, you reviewed how the program works. Now that you have received your voucher, it is important to ensure all of your paperwork is in order. Make sure that you sign your voucher with blue or black ink. You will want to keep a copy for your records. This document is proof that you are eligible to receive housing benefits. In your briefing packet, the Dallas Housing Authority provides information about resources designed to direct you to dwelling units that may be available for rent. At this time, apartments in the Dallas-Fort Worth rental market are in high demand and short supply. Any paper listing is stale as soon as it is published. Apps and websites represent a digital record of available units, which is more likely to be accurate than paper listings. Be diligent in your search process. Be prepared for rental agents to inform you there are no vacancies or that they don't accept Section 8 housing vouchers. When visiting rental offices, dress respectably, be polite and respectful. You only have one chance to make a good first impression. Do your homework. Research rental listings in neighborhoods for suitability. Get the word out to all your friends and relatives that you are looking for an apartment. They may provide you with a lead about an apartment from someone in their network of contacts.
DHA's jurisdiction covers the city of Dallas and 7 surrounding counties. DHA is able to assist families who locate suitable rental housing within the DHA jurisdiction. Unless you are a participant in the Walker Voucher program, you have the right to lease a dwelling unit outside DHA's jurisdiction. Leasing a rental unit outside of a public housing agency's jurisdiction is called portability. If you intend to exercise your right to portability, please notify staff at any time after the end of this presentation, and they will assist you in this process. Be sure to read the information on portability, especially if you plan to move to a jurisdiction outside of the 7-county jurisdiction of this agency. Families with a housing voucher may be permitted to use their voucher in another jurisdiction. This document provides information on DHA's area of operation, rules and procedures on portability. This document is included in your briefing packet. For your convenience, we have included a listing of neighboring housing authorities with contact information for their personnel that process portability. Your packet includes a map of our jurisdiction showing areas of opportunity. You can use this map to help you determine areas you may want to explore living in.
In your packet, there is a pamphlet that explains the Fair Housing Act, and there is also a housing discrimination complaint form. You should learn your rights under the Fair Housing Act and be sure you are not discriminated against as you search for a place to live using your voucher. Under the Fair Housing Act, housing discrimination includes refusal to rent to you or sell you housing because of a protected class, telling you housing is unavailable when it is available, showing you apartments or homes only in certain neighborhoods, providing different levels of housing services or facilities, advertising housing to preferred groups of people only, refusal to make certain modifications or accommodations for persons with a disability, harassment, coercion, intimidation, or interference with anyone exercising or assisting someone else with his or her fair housing rights. If you feel you have been discriminated against and the Fair Housing Act has been violated, please write, call, or email the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Fair Housing Department using the contact information provided here.
The voucher extension request form is included in your briefing packet. Your voucher will expire in 90 calendar days. Extensions may be granted for extenuating circumstances that prevent you from searching for a dwelling unit during the next 90 days that are beyond your control, or as a reasonable accommodation for persons with disability. Next, we will review the request for tenancy approval form. The request for tenancy approval is in the packet of information you take with you when searching for a place to live. The packet includes information on lead-based paint, housing quality standards checklist that allows you to inspect your unit for common housing quality standard violations. On page 2, or the backside of the request for tenancy approval form, you will find a place for the landlord's signature and for the tenant's signature. When you identify a landlord willing to rent their apartment or house to you, have them complete and sign the request for tenancy approval form. You must also review and sign the form. Either you or the landlord must then submit the request for tenancy approval form to DHA for processing. The receipt of the request for tenancy approval form is what DHA needs to determine if the requested rent is reasonable. Additionally, DHA will use the information on the form to schedule the inspection of the unit. DHA also needs other information from the landlord, such as a completed IRS Form W-9, the owner direct deposit form, proof of ownership of the dwelling unit, a copy of the property management agreement, if applicable, a completed owner information form. If you are a current participant in the DHA Housing Voucher Program and intend to relocate from your current assisted unit to another dwelling unit, you must complete all the steps outlined in this presentation. If after initiating the relocation process, you've decided to discontinue searching for a different rental unit and now prefer to remain in your current assisted unit, you must complete the DHA remaining in current unit form and submit the completed form to DHA along with your new lease.
The Things You Need to Know document includes information on the total tenant payment, which is the amount you will be responsible to pay, maximum initial rent burden, maximum subsidy, disability rent exception, and rent reasonableness. This document is included in your briefing packet. Please take time to read over this carefully. DHA has provided you with a rent computation worksheet to explain how rent is calculated. This worksheet provides you with the list of DHA payment standards and the allowances for tenant furnished utilities, which is your utility allowance schedule. The payment standard corresponding to the number of bedrooms on your voucher is the maximum amount of rent, less the utility allowance. The bottom table provides a schedule of utility allowances by the number of bedrooms and type of dwelling unit, such as a multifamily apartment, single-family home, duplex, or townhome. In this example, the utility allowance is for a single-family home. The utility allowance schedule represents an estimated cost of utilities. The allowance reduces your tenant rent amount. The utility allowance is not intended to reimburse households for their actual utility expense. The utility allowance is determined by the type of unit you select, the type of utilities found in the selected unit, the utilities the tenant is responsible to pay, and the lesser of the number of bedrooms in the unit or your voucher size. Don't forget, program participants pay a portion of rent based on the amount of their household income and the cost of the unit they select. The rent estimate worksheet is designed to help you determine the range of rental rates you can use in shopping for an available rental unit. A leasing professional will talk you through this worksheet with you during your interview.
Next, let's review the documents available to you that explain the inspection process. The brochure titled A Good Place to Live provides information about HUD's housing quality standards. It reviews the inspection standards for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. The Housing Authority will perform a detailed inspection of the unit you select, prior to agreeing to assist you with payments to the owner. This brochure is included in your briefing packet. The brochure titled "Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home" provides information about lead-based paint. If the dwelling unit you are planning to rent was built before 1978, it may contain lead-based paint. If you have children under the age of 6, they can be harmed if they ingest lead paint chips or lead dust. A lease is a binding contract. Be sure you want to live in the dwelling unit before you sign the lease. The lead-based paint brochure is included in your briefing packet.
The next document we'll review is the HUD Addendum. The tenancy addendum is a HUD-required form that must be signed by you and your landlord and becomes an addendum to the owner's lease. This document protects you from any prohibited provisions that may be found in the owner's lease agreement. Once all of these steps and documents are complete, DHA will authorize you to move into your new unit.
Once you have moved in, there are still some very important things you need to keep in mind. In your briefing packet, there's a pamphlet called "Protect Your Housing Benefits." This pamphlet provides you with information on how to protect your housing benefits by knowing and abiding by the rules governing the Housing Choice Voucher program. We look forward to assisting you with monthly rental housing assistance. It is important that you know, understand, and comply with your responsibilities in the Housing Voucher program to ensure that your assistance can continue as long as you need our help. Please carefully review the forms titled Family Obligations and Statement of Family Responsibility. As a reminder, these documents are in your briefing materials and are available for review on the Housing Authority website. Be sure to carefully read this form and all other information in your briefing packet. You will be asked to sign the Family Obligations form to indicate you have read and acknowledge receiving this important information. The list of family obligations is HUD's list of mandatory requirements for participation in the Housing Voucher program. Failure to comply with any family obligation may result in termination of rental housing assistance. The family obligations are: supply any and all information or documentation that the DHA determines necessary. Allow DHA to inspect the dwelling unit. Be honest and report all income. Must not engage in drug-related or other criminal activity. Comply with the voucher program requirements. Notify DHA before moving, before adding or removing any household members, or when your household income changes. Be a good neighbor. Comply with the owner's lease. Use the assisted unit solely as a principal place of residence. Occupants, relatives, or others not on the lease may not live in the assisted dwelling unit. If you are unsure of what you should do in certain situations or have questions, refer to the program rules or call your DHA leasing professional. Remember, an intentional or unintentional violation of the family obligations could cause you to lose your housing benefits. The booklet titled A Guide to Easy Housekeeping is designed to provide you with some helpful tips on inexpensive cleaning methods and suggested cleaning schedule. As a tenant, it is your responsibility to care for the dwelling unit and keep it clean.
We've covered a lot of material today, but this presentation is available for your review on the DHA website at www.dhantx.com. Please be sure to direct any relevant questions to the DHA leasing professional and to sign the necessary forms now. On behalf of DHA, thank you for taking the time to learn about the information in your program packet.